Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where in this wonderful world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. We have a very special interview today in association with Pride365 World. An amazing guest. Let's go.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Highbury Squad. Highbury Squad Studios, in association with Pride365, presenting a very special episode for you today. An incredible guest, a trailblazer, a man who is on a mission, Dr. Nas Mohamed, founder of the Proud Maroons, and many, many other things. Welcome to Squad Central. It's fantastic to have you here today.
Thank you. That's such a kind introduction.
You owe me $50.
Okay, I'll fund you after.
No, it's well deserved, very well deserved. And I've been looking forward to our conversation. Our listeners will know we have talked about you, your organization on other shows, and many of our listeners have seen your story in the build up here to the World Cup. And we're going to get to the World Cup and we're going to get to all of that in just a little second. But your story started way before Qatar were awarded the World Cup 11 years ago now. And I'm just wondering, 11 years ago, were you here in the United States? Were you still in Qatar when that happened?
So is that
2011? 2010, 11, yeah.
I had just left Qatar in 2011.
Wow.
Yeah, I left Qatar to Connecticut to start my residency in 2011.
So let's rewind even further, Dr. Nas, and talk about growing up in Qatar. I grew up in a Greek Cypriot family. My parents are from Cyprus, and they were very protective. Greeks like to wrap up their children in cotton wool, don't like them to venture too far out. They want them to be safe, and that's a good thing, but it's also and can be a very suffocating thing. Despite that, I still felt like I had these freedoms to express myself and, play football or netball or hang out with my friends on my bike. What was it like for you? Tell us what it was like for you growing up in Qatar.
It's really tough to communicate what's our community like for people that haven't been to Qatar. Because even within the Qatari society, there are some social differences too between different sects of the Qatari community. There's the Bedouins that are super rural, more traditional, and then there are people that live in the cities, and people that live in the cities also have different social classes in a way. So even though it's a small community overall, it's still pretty diverse in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And to the people that live in the United States, like when I find myself here with somebody that asks me like how I was brought up, I tell them that I see a lot of similarities in how I was brought up to the Mormon community, for example, in the U.S.
Wow.
There's just so many analogies, even in the way they practice religion, and how close they are in a way, and you're either in or out. There are just a lot of similarities to draw, and there's also I was also when I did my fellowship in Pennsylvania, right? So I got to experience a little bit of the Amish culture, a little bit Amish community, and there are some similarities there too, actually, to that community as well. And the way I would describe the Qatar, if you're a Qatari, right? If you're from Qatar and grew up as part of the society, there is this inner scene, if you wish. There is this scene that even if you live in Qatar, you may not be exactly invited to see what it's like to be with us. People may not I didn't when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I never saw non-Qataris at a Qatari wedding ever. When I was growing up, it may have changed now. Like when I was growing up, I've never seen anybody that was not Qatari there. I haven't seen anybody that's not Qatari in any of the formal events we had. It was just such a closed society, right? And at the time I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I didn't have access to the internet. I only had, I come from a humble family, so I didn't even travel. I didn't have anything really to expose me to the outside world, if you wish. And
Was the internet your parents' choice, or was that a monetary thing? Was it,
I think it was
or,
just
or
like,
was it a government thing?
I think it was like a government thing a little bit. Like we just didn't
Right.
really have internet. Like a lot of people, it wasn't common for people to have access to the internet at home. I remember, like, in high school, it was the first time I used a computer, really. Like,
Wow.
sat on a computer and used it.
Yeah.
So that was, it was different, right?
And you had and you grew up with siblings, and
yes.
and connecting with your siblings growing up, did you feel the same, different? Did you get along? Were they there to help balance?
Yeah.
And I'm talking even before maybe finding out or figuring out that you're gay.
Yeah.
Was it
So
a happy home in childhood with your siblings?
we had a lot of different journeys with my family. We moved a lot because of my dad's job, and I'm one of 9, and I'm number 8, and
Wow.
I was kind of like the accident child, actually.
Me too. I was the last one. I was an accident.
Yeah. So my older sister is 8 years older than me, and they were all close in age. So there was an age gap between me and my older siblings. So I felt a little bit distanced because of that. And then once they had me, they're like, "Well, maybe we should have one more." And then they had my younger sister. And then, so my younger sister and I were closer just because we were even closer in age than my older siblings. But yeah, I would say, we had tough and rough patches for sure. But for the most part, I would say I did get along with my siblings.
So then you're going through school and you're becoming a teenager, and when does things start kicking in for you where are you feeling, when you're growing up in Qatar, you're starting to feel a little bit different, or did that transition happen when you went to university and came to the United States?
I definitely like had same-sex attraction and boy crushes like throughout my teen years, and um, didn't have anybody to talk to about this. I actually remember one of my cousins who was older than me telling me once we were sitting in the having dinner as a family, and they were just talking about silly things kids do, right? And they were like, "Hey, Nasser," right? They were calling him by full name, which now I go by Nas, which is another story. But they were like, "Hey, Nasser, do you remember like when you were a kid and when we used to ask you what you would want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "No, like, I was like a little kid, maybe I was like 4 or 5." And they're like, "Well, you always said you wanted a husband."
Oh gosh. Wow. Was that shocking to the family, or did they find it funny because they
They
thought
found
you were
it.
young and it was just you
They found
being
it
young?
funny. They found it funny. They're like, "Oh, that's so funny." And then I would just like, I was closer to my female cousins and my younger sister, and um, I didn't want to play with the boys. I always wanted to go and play with the girls, and I would play house with them. But I was also a nerd, so I really gave them, I think, a lot of trauma playing house with them because all the dolls had to have IDs, and I created a
Wow.
whole city and gave them a lot of work, so they kind of hated playing house with me. But
Are you a Virgo by any chance?
I'm a Gemini.
A Gemini, okay. um, so were you able to talk to anybody before? I know you went through your teenage years, you make the decision you want to study medicine. You probably know as a young man, growing up in Qatar, the arranged marriage is around the corner
Yeah,
somewhere along the lines. Were
yeah.
you able to talk to your female cousins? I felt the same way growing up. I didn't feel like I had a safe zone to, and it was very different, being a Generation Xer and how
Yeah.
it was coming out back then. But were you
Well,
able to talk to anybody?
so so in Qatar, a lot of big families encourage arranged marriage, and a lot of them try to set it up with first degree cousins, actually. And so when I was growing up, so one of my aunts talked to my mom about my arranged marriage possibly at some point, and they were like, well, maybe it would be his cousin, and it was like the cousin I grew up with, like playing dolls, right? And I was kind of like worried about that, but then I was like, well, I like playing dolls with her. and, and, and then she was like, she was a little worried too, because they would like they would have some say, but like a lot of the time they like women would have to follow what like their families would choose for
Hmm.
them. So I remember as young teens, we talked about this, me and my cousin. We were like, listen, if like it gets bad and we don't have like any other choice, basically, we'll do it and we'll be fine. You know?
Right. And you knew you could trust each other to get through that if you had to in that
Yeah.
moment. There are other cultures too, like second and third cousin. I know back in the 70s and 80s, and I know a couple of Greek, third cousins. I think that go as far as that, uh, you know, from back in the day. But that must have been very scary and daunting. And do you feel like your studies and your eventual kind of path to the United States, I don't want to be overly dramatic here and say saved your life, but maybe it did in many ways. How do you go from dodging the arranged marriage and understanding, okay, I know who I am, and then
Yeah.
transitioning your journey to the
There were
US?
just there were just so many like unlikely moments, to be quite honest. Like I want to say that happened to me, and a lot of them aligned, and they just led to me being here.
Hmm.
And it's a combination of hard work for sure. Like I did work pretty hard, but also I was also lucky in a way. So I grew up in rural Qatar. Um, it's like grew up in Said and then Al Wakra, and those two are 2 hours south of Doha, of the
Hmm.
capital, and they were pretty rural, honestly. Like at the time I was growing up, like from our house, tiny house, I could only see the desert, honestly. Like when I get out, like it was just really in the middle of nowhere. And um, when I was in school, I one year, like I feel like I had like I was trying to be a rebel. Like I was just so upset with so many things that were out of my control. We were from a
Mm.
poor family, and the only thing I had control over was studying. And I wanted to show that I can, be different, And I was like, I want to show I can do more than my siblings did. Because when I went to that school, rural school, the way I was received was, oh, here's another one from that family. It's going to be another loser, basically. My brothers did not do well in school. And I was like, you know what? I want to change that story for me. And I did really well. So I graduated first in that school. But then something happened because at that time, Qatar was trying to build an educational city. So they contracted with a lot of schools from the US to open Qatar
Mhm.
Foundation. It was done by the Sheikh Moza, by the royal family. And to prepare people locals to get into these universities and sit for their standardized testing, they opened a special high school that would then switch their curriculum from Arabic to English and start preparing students to do well to get into these schools. And they handpicked students from the country to put in this school, and I just happened to pick that year to do well in school. So I was selected to then go to Doha to go to that high school, and that's when I started how to speak English basically in high school, and and then so I was commuting an hour and a half every day to high school.
Wow, there and back.
Yep.
Wow.
And so worked pretty hard. I graduated third from that school, and then the royal family invited me and my dad to meet them, and we went there. We had dinner.
What was that like?
It was like really crazy. You know, it was just extra. You know.
I can imagine how extra you're talking.
It
That's
was
what a proud moment though for your parents and
I
for
think
you.
my dad, like, I think my parents just like they didn't finish school. They had fourth and fifth grade education, and my siblings at that time didn't go through college. So a lot of them dropped out actually from school, and so they couldn't understand why somebody would go through school. You know, like they just couldn't get it. And then it really hit them when we got the invitation to go and meet the royal family, and they were like, my dad was like, "Wow, you did this." I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
did this."
did. You wouldn't get that invitation now. That's
Oh, definitely not.
definitely not.
I met them twice. I met them when I graduated from high school, and then I met Sheikh Moza again when I graduated from Cornell Medical School, which is
Wow.
located in Qatar.
So you
I think
kind
that
of
changed my life. So
the Cornell graduation and that period, is that when you came out to your family? What does that look like? You go from being a hero and meeting the Qatar royal family twice. You finish, you know, like in the top 3 students. You come to the United States. I've lost count how many degrees you actually have. What's the next big step then when you have that moment where you realize I need to live my life the way I want and I can't live in fear anymore?
So it was like, so I was stalling and pushing the arranged marriage conversation because I was in medical school. And I was like, you know, I don't want to get married while I'm in medical school, which I think even if I was straight, I wouldn't want that. I think I really wanted to finish medical school. I was in my early 20s, and I was just really leaning more into my sense of self. And that's, you know, that was like the one like moment I remember I accepted the fact that I'm different. And it was when I went to present in a conference in Vegas. And you know, like in that sexually charged environment, I was really there face to face with my sexuality, honestly. And
it's a really profound moment, isn't it, when you have that looking in the mirror moment and you realize, wow, this is really who I am. It's quite incredible, isn't it? It's almost like a relief within yourself, but at the same time, you know that you have all these other things to confront ahead of you.
Yeah, I remember the moment. I actually didn't even, like, I was a virgin at that time. And I hadn't even kissed a boy, honestly. And I just was too afraid to do anything. And I did not even do anything during that trip. But the only thing that I did was build up the courage to walk into a gay club. And I did. And it took so much for me to walk in there because I remember I was afraid of the government, first of all. I had my Qatari passport. And that's something really important to note. A lot of us has this fear of being watched, and it's not irrational. We are being watched. So when I showed my ID at the door, I was like shaking, basically. I thought that would be it. Like I would just show my ID and I would be arrested, you know? And I had the photo on my passport had me with the traditional attire. We have to legally do that. And the guy was like, "Oh, call photo, come in." I was like, "Okay."
You're like, wow, I really am in a different place now. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And then I walk in, and it was like, you know, I see go-go boys dancing, and I see a lot of gay men flirting, and I was like, I think I'm gay. And I just turned around and left immediately and went back to my hotel room and just had like a major meltdown. And I was like, I am in trouble. Like, first of all, what does that mean? There's something wrong with me. I'm like, I'm different.
Mhm.
I'm different for sure. I know I'm different now, conclusively. But then also, I was like, being this type of different is really not okay at home. And it was a crisis moment. And that was the beginning of me choosing to leave. Really, that was the beginning of me feeling unsafe, feeling like that I don't belong. And then I went back home to finish the last year of medical school, or like a year and a half of medical school. And within that year and a half, I came out to my best friend and then decided to leave for residency to do my training after medical school. And that's when I was like, I don't think I'm going to come back. I don't know how, but I'm going to have to make it work.
And someone helped you kind of realize that you could seek asylum in the US, and then you have to have that conversation with your family.
Yeah.
And I read something where, and it really hit me in the soul, because I know exactly how that moment probably felt for you, where you had to say goodbye to your mother. And I don't think people realize that I lost my parents for 8 years of my life when I came out. We have a much better, healthier, amazing relationship now, but I don't think people realize how hard it is to lose your parents when they're still alive.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Um, it's hard, Um, you experience a lot of guilt, right? You feel like that you have failed. You have failed at being there, right? You have failed at being at home. And gosh, now just like that moment is just still really hard for me to lean back into, because it was a moment where I just couldn't be home, you know?
Do you have a relationship with your family now?
I don't. No. That was the
And
beginning of the end of that. I came out to them in 2015, when I decided to file for asylum.
do you think you'll ever have a relationship with them ever again?
Not while they live there now. Now I'm like really considered like a political enemy, basically, right? And like it's really not safe to have any relationship with me.
How does that feel to you, to know that you are kind of like a public enemy number one with your own country?
It just feels so dumb. It feels so like, honestly, it feels dumb. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody. I'm just asking for us to be safe at home. And for that to be such an outrageous ask is just, I don't get it.
What Let's fast forward then. So you've got a very going through this process. I can't imagine. I mean, everyone has their journey, and you know, um, it's so funny because you say this and you feel like you sound kind of like immature for saying it, in the sense some people just still don't get it. It's like gay is not a choice. It's who you are, you know and you're so talented, and you've come here and made a life for yourself. I mean, you do incredible things. And I don't know if people know, but in your clinic in San Francisco, you offer free medical services to the LGBTQ community. You're a trailblazer, you're an activist, you're doing all these amazing things with love, and all based on love, the love of where you came from, your country, your people, trying to kind of change things the way other trailblazers before you have come. So when the World Cup, before the World Cup, you reached out to people at a local level because you can't find the gay community in Qatar. Can you talk us through that a little bit prior to when that journey to really kind of get stuck in and help people on the ground who you know are there probably suffering internally and not being able to live their lives externally? When did that part of your journey begin?
That started like maybe in 2018, I want to say. It started when somebody from my school, Cornell, reached out to me and said, I know a student that I think is LGBT and I think they need help. And then I started supporting that person and just kind of really providing emotional support, but also just telling them about my own journey and kind of helping them through their own, like navigating options for them, kind of like a friend, but also just giving independent advice. Then I
Mhm.
started getting more of those. I started getting them from the US and from like people just knew that I took asylum and started like asking me to advise other people about it.
Mhm.
And then a physician here used reached out to me. He works for Rainbow Street, which is an organization that helps people in the Middle East escape to safety when their life is in danger. And then they said, you know, we need some advice. And I can't tell you exactly what I was doing because it's kind of not public. I've been kind of like part of an underground network, basically helping people from different countries in the Middle East when needed in different capacities, just for them to be safe.
Mhm.
Um, and then and then through that work, I met a couple of people that are Qatari, um, and we've been in touch a little bit. I knew some people from before, but I didn't know more than 10, like less than 10 for sure, less than 10 gay Qataris up till this year. Now I know hundreds, which is like such a weird like experience for me to know that many LGBT Qataris. But yeah,
You and beforehand, had you heard of things happening on the ground where can
yeah.
you talk
So
what was
so
going on?
because it's like because in that society, when something bad happens or what they perceive as a bad outcome, the reaction is to cover it up and not talk about it because you would bring shame to your family, you would bring shame to your society, right? Like if somebody commits suicide, for example, that
Mhm.
is not something you would hear about at all. It would just, they would even lie about how they died. You know, it's just like you just don't talk about it. So then when somebody gets in trouble for being gay, that's like a big no-no, and you would like not only not hear about it, people try to actively cover it up, but we hear stories like in the community, and there were sometimes bordering on rumors. You know, for example, in high school, I heard about actually one of my friends that I knew was caught by an undercover cop. That he was chatting with a guy online, and they set up a day and time to meet up. And then when he met that person, he realized he was a government agent, was trying to see which guys would try meeting other guys on the internet in Qatar. And luckily, my friend was careful, so he didn't explicitly express intent to have sex. So he was like, "Oh no, I thought we're just friends, whatever." So he talked his way out of it. But he was nervous about that. He was like, that was really scary.
Mhm.
And then I heard more stories like that. And then the some families in Qatar are just so proud, right? They have this cultural pride, and to a point where it becomes like bad.
Mhm.
It's borders on arrogance, and then they can go and hurt their own family members that would alter their image. And I want to say something like in that region, in the Gulf region, before Islam, like from like thousands of years ago, In that region, they used to have a practice called wi'ad, and in that practice, like dads would go to see their newborn child, and if that child is a baby girl, they could kidnap the baby girl and go and bury her alive in the desert out of fear that she may grow up and then bring shame to the family. So like that mentality of your child having sex is something that affects you and your reputation, your image, it still exists in that region. You know, that mentality is still there. And it's like, is the root for honor killing still? And and why some people would hurt their family members, men and women, for having extramarital sex, especially if it's gay sex.
Uh, what's your knowing all these things, and I, one of the things I think that's the toughest part of the conversation is that Qatar is not the first country to host an event where there are problems, um, whether it's religious, economical. Uh, People have pointed to other World Cups in other countries, the Olympic Games. Um, what is it? What I guess the whataboutism that everybody is talking about now. What about Russia? What about England? What about the US? What about Australia? What about France? There are problems everywhere. What do you think about the whataboutism, that the narrative that has ensued? I felt that once the football started, people would want to hear less about the human rights issues.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel the same way, but how do you feel about the whataboutism stuff in
It
comparison to
just
the
tells me people are, it's not their life experience. So they're just talking about it like an idea. They're not talking about people. And, you know, I was drawing this analogy, and I really want to like spend maybe 5 minutes if I can, just drawing an analogy to how I'm experiencing like the World Cup in Qatar. And I really compare it to a household that is affluent, that is domestically abusing their children, right? And they have these children in the basement where they're being tortured. Like, let's like put it in the most bizarre way where we're not arguing that this is domestic abuse. They're tied in chains and being whipped, like, and starved. You know, like, let's just make it obvious where there's no like debate on whether or not they were domestically abused. I was one of the children that got out and got to safety, and I had a path. I was lucky. And now that house is hosting this really fancy dinner party. Okay. And it's to introduce the parents to the society, to the rest of the community, to put them on the map. Okay. And all the arguments, I feel like, when I came out and said, you know, this, they're bad to their children, they're like, well, first of all, this is a dinner party. Dinner parties are not supposed to fix domestic abuse. Second of all, if we wait for the perfect family, are we ever going to have a dinner party? Third of all, like, who are you to tell people how to raise their children? Are you a perfect parent yourself? Hold on. Did you just come in as a white person and tell a brown family they're abusive? Did you just tell a Muslim family they're bad to their children? Really? That's Islamophobic. Or are we raising all of these issues now because this family is Muslim? Or is it because they're Arab? You see what I'm doing here? I stopped talking about the children in the basement. That's what's going on. We like moved from the people and got into these philosophical debates, and then in the middle of this mess where people are just like, and then there's just so many, oh gosh, I can keep going with this analogy. Like, then people are coming in once they hear this story, they have their own vested interest in that dinner party. They're going to make some money. They're going to make some, it's a big party. That's where you're supposed to be. Well, as long as our kids are fine, are the children we bring going to be okay? If they're going to be okay, then that's great, because that's what's going on right now, basically. And in the middle of this chaos, what I'm trying to establish is that if one of those kids come out and say, I need help, don't say, oh, we know your parents, they're fantastic, they had all of us there, let's take you back. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay? Because they're not okay. And in that noisy dinner party, trying to sneak in some phone numbers to them, so that if one of them wants to get out when they're not okay, they know who to call. And then at the other end, I'm trying to make sure they're received. So the whole thing about why this house, well, to me, it's where I grew up. And to me, there is less knowledge about the children in my house than there are children in other houses. And that's why I'm speaking up. And for all the people that are coming in, participating in this conversation, to talk about the children in the basement, why are you talking about it? What are you going to do about it? Are you talking about it just to engage in philosophical debates? Because frankly, as a kid that grew up there, I don't give a shit about your opinion. I just don't. Like, you can think about it all you want. You can have any opinion you want about Qatar, about religion, about LGBT people, whatever opinion you want to have, you can have. I deserve to live and I deserve to be safe. Whatever you think, I still have to live. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about philosophical debates. I'm talking about real people wanting to have a shot at life.
Basic human rights that you deserve as much as the straight man standing next to you, or the single woman, or whoever. Everybody, every human deserves the same in this world. And at that dinner party, there was someone who I have to say, a lot of people in the world have been exceptionally disappointed with, and that is David Beckham. And I wanted to know if this story was true, Dr. Nas, about this image, and you reached out to him when he became the face of Qatar for the World Cup, and he blocked you on Instagram, and it went. Yeah, I think you were asked about it in the press, and you mentioned it, and then he unblocked you after it went public.
Yeah.
What's your take on all of this? Because I think some of the whataboutism is pertaining to like a Gary Neville, who
Yeah.
talks a lot and complains a lot about his own country, but has some acceptance in terms of, his role in the World Cup. Not some acceptance, total acceptance, because he's there. David Beckham, who's a gay icon since day one, went from the moment he scored that insane goal for Manchester United in the late 90s. Talk me through that a little bit, and what your take is on people who go, they're doing their job, people earning money. How it's so blurred. What's your take on Beckham?
I want to tell you like a couple of things. I have like just a couple of thoughts about that. The first one is the fact, like before I get to David Beckham, the first part is about how people have been doing this in our region for a long time in different capacities, leaning in for their own interest, and then leaning out or turning a blind eye to things that are wrong because they don't want it to affect their livelihood. An example that I had growing up, I'm not going to mention a lot of details, there was a foreign person who was an expat that was living in Qatar. And they got to learn more about a lot of us in Qatar. They actually somehow got into the gay community in Qatar. And they also knew me and a lot of people that I went to medical school with. And they were just really fascinated by the Qatari culture. And they just got to know us for years, many years. Then I told them I'm gay. And they were afraid for me too. They were like, "Whew, like this is really not gonna fit where you are," basically. And then I had this whole thing about like leaving, and then fast forward, I needed to defend my asylum case. So I reached out to that person and I was like, "Hey, there are no like reports on what happened to us in Qatar, but I know you know a lot of information. Would you write me an affidavit to support my asylum case?" And they're like, "Well, you know, I really just don't want to get in trouble in any way. We have really good livelihood here in Qatar. We have a comfortable life and a really good job. Good luck to you." Right? So that's now, luckily, I won my asylum case. I'm here. They're still in Qatar, living their fantastic life, living in a beautiful home, benefiting from an amazing job. And yeah, that keeps happening on so many levels. And now back to David Beckham. This is like the big unapologetic display of this, because when I came out to speak, I have no platform, right? Like I'm one person. I didn't have a PR and marketing and financial backing, and I'm literally just there trying to get the story out. So when I was trying to look at ways that are effective to get the story out, I was like, maybe I should reach out to the PR face of this World Cup, David Beckham. He's paid tens of millions reportedly to do their PR work. And then I'm seeing his PR work combined with his reputation in the gay community, and I was like, this is really like wrong, right? Because if somebody, like going back to the analogy, if somebody says, "I am the savior of children and I help children everywhere," and then you go and promote the dinner party for that household, people will assume children there are safe, right? And that's wrong. That was the damaging part of his work. So I was really trying to get the story out and was not successful in getting their attention. So I wrote them an open letter and I sent it to all of his teams, right? He has like so many, I sent it everywhere that I could. And his PR lead, Shires, I think it's Victoria, maybe Shires. And then she reached out to get a copy. So I know she knows. And I know she's on my Instagram checking my stories. So I know she knows. And they got it and they just ghosted. And then after they ghosted, I published a letter in the Independent saying, "You are crushing hope for the LGBT community and you're challenging our plea to asylum with your PR work." Was a very strongly worded letter, published it in the Independent. And then shortly after that, he went to have a party at Aspire Academy. And I published two things about that. So at Aspire Academy, he was like, "Oh, this place is perfection, blah, 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 blah." There was another instructor at the Aspire Academy that literally had a video series about how to aggressively reject the LGBT community. And that was only in Arabic. And then David Beckham was at the same facility promoting it. So I tagged them both in the same post. And I said, "You two need to, these two versions need to merge." And that they both blocked me, basically on Instagram. And then I published the story about that instructor in the Independent and put it in the Metro newspaper that I can't access David Beckham's account anymore on Instagram. And once that made it to the news, they unblocked me. I'm sure it's his PR team because they're trying to minimize how tragic what they're doing is. And there are many people right now that are leaning in that region, and they're trying to have it both ways. They want to go and have the benefits, the connections, the money, and then PR manage the human rights issues. That's what's going on.
That's incredible. And it's evident that there are many people who are disappointed in a few ex-players or journalists broadcasting teams, and it's really tough because there are people that don't have the means Beckham has, who have to go there and work the World Cup and earn their crust. Dr. Nas,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not easy. Do you feel like if a journalist who's just trying to make a buck and goes there to cover the World Cup, it's their job, um, how do you feel about that layer? Because some don't have a choice, but at the end of the day, they do. Not everybody went, and not everybody has to go, but some people have to live, and
yeah.
if they don't go, they don't have a job.
Exactly. I know. And I know some of them actually, some have been in touch with me and they've been trying, for example, to speak about me. And some of them they couldn't. That journalists would push and then their producers would be like, we're not doing this. We're not talking about that aspect. So sometimes the journalists themselves are truly stuck. They're trying, but then their producers
Mhm.
push back. And, it's like this weird place where like
Yeah.
some hands are tied.
What did you think of the One Love armband situation? It
That
felt
whole thing,
Go
that
on.
whole thing, that whole thing is just like it's like going back to that dinner party. It's like coming in saying wearing armband saying we love children. Great. I'm really glad you love children. Now what? Because
Do you think England should have worn the armband? Do you think it would have at least said, maybe what you and others want is "F you, we're gonna do what we want, we're wearing the armband, and we'll take the consequences and the punishment for it"?
I don't know. I feel like almost rejecting it was a better outcome because really shows the point I've been trying to make that Qatar is really homophobic. So point is
Right.
made. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Um,
What about the
and
Proud Maroons and the football side of it? Like, have you been watching the games? And tell everyone about the Proud Maroons. Here you are. You know, another layer to your activism. You've started. Is it the first LGBTQ footballer group in the Middle East, not just in Qatar? Is that
yes,
right?
yes.
It's
And, it,
incredible.
and it's like it was hard to like tell people very quickly about everything that we've been doing because since coming out, we connected people to documentaries in Germany, London, and the Human Rights Watch. We've been trying to prove that there is persecution, that there is fear, that there is state-sponsored jailing and conversion therapy. And then how do you put that, package it, and like really communicate it during the World Cup, right? So there was a team called the Community that reached out. I'm really grateful to them for producing this really quickly. But the way we did it is basically if you go back to the um, dinner analogy, it's like them saying, "No, we love children. All children are welcome. You just have to be respectful of our rules at the house." Because if you're not, you will be, hung from your toes and tortured. But they don't mention that part. But anyway, they say, okay, yeah, and here, like, all the children are welcome. So the Proud Maroons is like going in and setting a kids' table for the kids in that house to demonstrate that they're missing, to really point out that there are people that should be sitting in that table that are not there. So that's the Proud Maroons. So the Proud Maroons is an LGBT supporter group for the Qatari football team that cannot have people from its own country join because they would be persecuted. So then I ask other kids to come and join in solidarity and sit at their table and say, we're all in this together. So that's the idea of the Proud Maroons. It's just like an awareness campaign. And it's a fundraiser for the foundation I started, the Alwan Foundation.
And I'm assuming you've had, like you said, everyone that follows the Proud Maroons on social media or engages with them is outside of your own country.
Yes.
What are you learning about what's happening during the World Cup? we've talked about what are people saying to you about what's happening on the ground? I mean, there are a lot of people there who are having a good time.
Yeah.
And of course, the Human Rights Watch report on the workers as well, and all of those things. But in the end, once the spectacle begins, the fans go, they eat, they drink, they enjoy. They've worked hard to play hard, and
Yeah.
they are there to enjoy something that only happens once every 4 years. Obviously, the juxtaposition is all of the other things going on. What are you hearing about this World Cup on the ground? Truly, how it's being received, how people are being treated?
So it really is empowering hate speech from my perspective for the LGBT community. So they have these, like, it's hypocrisy. Like, for example, they say, keep politics out of football. Like, that's their narrative, right? But then in reality, they are allowing the politics that they want to be shown. For example, when Iranians went and raised signs about like women and freedom on the stadiums, they were taken out aggressively. And a lot of them were pulled aside. There were tons of videos about how abrasive, like they were with them to just take these political signs down. But then, if anybody holds things to free Palestine, that's allowed. I mean, that because that's something that they wanted to push and they agree with. So that political statement is allowed, but that other political statement they disagree with is not allowed. So that's oppression of speech, okay? And that's number one. Number two, now when you go into the gay LGBT issue, I mean, you heard about so many incidents, right, of them asking people to leave, having people throw their rainbow flags in the trash,
Yep.
and then people wearing armbands asked to leave. At the same time, there is an anti-LGBT campaign in the Middle East called Fitra, which means natural instinct. They literally have like straight people flag. It's blue and pink. And they say their slogan is there are only two genders and only these two genders can be together. And then in the stadiums, they would be holding these signs up with the colors and with their hate speech. And that's allowed to stay. They're not going to take that down. So, you know, it's not really about, like, we've been gaslit basically about their stance. This is political, whether you like it or not. And there are oppressing speech to allow only their political views to be shown. And
As an English person, I was born in England of Greek descent. I was disappointed with England took the knee and didn't wear the armband. That's where, for me, the rubber met the road in terms of, wow, okay, so and the fight for racism is
yeah,
fundamentally important, and look how far
yeah.
we've come, but how far yet we have to go. But I felt like it was saying, we're going to support this, but we're not going to support this, just to kind of riff of what you were saying.
Because to me, although the armband gesture on its own is not going to bring resources and help to us directly,
Yeah.
at the same time, like it's such an important message because it says your abusive treatment of LGBT people is not acceptable, and it's not something that we will accept in the name of culture and tradition. But then they did. So that did hurt, actually, like for them to not wear it. But it did prove a point for us that Qatar is truly
I understand
homophobic.
where you were coming from on that front, 100%. And it
Because-
can work. It can work one way, for you being from there, having lived it, breathed it, it, and a different one for me, having been born in London, for example. Of Greek parents, I can see it. And that's the beauty, though, isn't it? Is like we can see things differently, agree, disagree, have conversations, and I'm wondering what the conversation about Qatar is going to be once this is all over and done with. When the
I
world
hope there is
leaves.
one. I hope
When
there
the
is one.
when the world leaves, Dr. Nas, what's the legacy? I think from a football point of view, the legacy will be, well, whoever won the World Cup. But what is the overall legacy of this World Cup, do you think?
I was really
It's going to
hoping.
be.
I was really hoping, and I did pitch this to different football teams actually, and I tried to engage with FIFA, but they didn't either. That's a whole other thing. But I was trying to tell them for LGBT rights, it would be wonderful for this World Cup to lean in and out, giving the local community a voice and a platform. Let us fight the fight, but help us have a voice. And that's what I was trying to do with the charity, because there's no LGBT charity that's focuses on that area. So I pulled one together last minute and said, hey, here is a way to support it. I mean, I can't do it on my own. If you support it, that could be your legacy of being there, like coming in and giving people a voice, so that when you came in with your massive global platform, you didn't cover up our abuse. Like when you came to that dinner party, you didn't try to hide that there are children in the basement. You open a child protective services agency. Like that would be an amazing legacy, wouldn't it? Right? Yes, it wouldn't fix, you can't fix domestic abuse with one dinner, but then maybe that child protective agency would be like something that can work long term to help children in their region, and that house and other homes, you know?
And the same way new laws have been passed, and you can tell me if this is fact or fiction. ESPN did a documentary on the human rights, report and the workers, and how laws since the construction of stadiums started has evolved and changed and come into law. And I
Yeah.
guess you just want the same for the next step would be to do the same for the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, nothing unfortunately changed for us. If anything, I'm actually worried about local retaliation post the World Cup. Kuwait started something which knowing how the Gulf countries work together, I really think is a thing they're all doing in collaboration.
Which is
Kuwait, but so in Arabic, especially in their region, they refuse to refer to us as gay and lesbian. They like to refer to us with a term called shad or shada, which means sexual deviant. And they actually refuse to use a less abrasive term because they think it's too tolerant. So Kuwait has started a campaign sponsored by tons of NGOs and charities, and they put these big billboards in highways in Kuwait saying, he is not gay, you are a man, and he's a sexual deviant. And then they have the female version of that too, and it's all over highways in Kuwait. This just started this week. And in a way, it kind of like takes some heat off from Qatar about the homophobia and kind of diffuses it a little bit. But that's what they do. So like, I think there's like now going to be this coordinated effort to crack down, basically.
Well, there's no terminology that angers me more than the sexual deviant one. And to make people think that, the way you see your fellow man, someone who was born in the same country as you, as an animal, in your opinion. And by the way, animals are beautiful.
Exactly.
But that terminology is so degrading and so disrespectful on many, many fronts, and to be called that or compared to something like that. I don't think people realize as a human being how hurtful and how that impacts someone.
Listen, like it's not like on the first day of this World Cup, there was a shooting in a gay club in Colorado. And
yes.
And hate speech like this that we're seeing, dehumanizing a group of people is the first step you need to then take a step like they did in that club to come into our spaces and terrorize us and kill us.
Same with Orlando, same in other places in the world where horrible, horrific things like this have happened. And our focus today has been on Dr. Nas's story and Qatar. And that's not to say that we don't identify and realize that there are issues in many, many different parts of the world. And we are tackling them one step at a time. And the reason why we're talking about Qatar, of course, it's the centerpiece of the universe right now. The World Cup is happening there. And, FIFA have a lot to answer for themselves. But we'll leave that episode for another day, and hopefully you and I can have a follow-up conversation after things settle, Dr. Nas, after the World Cup, just to kind of touch base and see how things are going. What message would you like to leave people with if you walk away from today's interview and think, oh, I wish you'd have asked me this or I'd have said that? What would that be?
Um, I just really want, like, there are going to be many different people listening to this, right? Some of them will be from Arab countries too, and we're, I know we're all fighting. I know we're all fighting, and I just want to let people know that despite there's just so much love that's not public that I received from all over the world, truly, truly. I had people from almost, definitely all continents and more than 50 countries reach out to say, we're one community, we're fighting together. I'm sorry it's hard where you guys are. And I thought that was really beautiful. And it's also hopeful, right? This, because we're seeing some really tough battle and it feels like punching a brick wall today for us. But you know, the front line looked like that in different countries at different points in time. And I just want to say we're all in this together as like one global community.
Very well said. You're a very brave man, and I am very grateful that you have shared your story with us today. Huge thank you as well to our friends at Pride365. Go follow them. Their Facebook book page is amazing. They're doing great things working with brands to make sure LGBTQ community workers, employees are looked after 365 days a year and not just on the week of Pride. And that they're setting a great example for building a culture that is safe and enjoyable for all people. And of course, please go follow the Proud Maroons. Give them a follow. You can follow Dr. Nas here as well. And let's continue the conversation. Without conversation, nothing really changes. Dr. Nas, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.